Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they got it right. And this is your host, Tom Navolis, and I'm so delighted that you are joining me today as I have one of my favorite guests on, none other than John Trudel. John, you there?
I certainly am and honored to be here. Thank you for having me, Tom.
As always, thank you for your time. This has definitely been an interesting time since we spoke last and you've been on the program. You've had some harrowing things happen. Not only that, you have the book that we talked about the last time when it was just getting ready to be released is kind of knocking it out of the park, and some other fun stuff. So let's catch up with everybody a little bit and just talk about your going out doing book signings, those types of things. And you had a harrowing experience this past year, haven't you?
Well, some people say that. It was certainly interesting. It was certainly unusual, and it was beyond anything I've ever seen. What I have been doing ever since I retired from high tech, as you know, I've been writing novels.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of my business model was we had the airplane, and we had friends all over the country. And the big cities are kind of owned by the big publishers. You know, they pay the
Right.
bookstores and everything.
Right.
But you go to a small town, they are so happy to see an author. And so we were living the dream. We're going to all these little towns, and they would have events for us, and we do signings at libraries and at the airports and the city halls and wherever. You know,
Uh-huh.
even on an Indian reservation once. So I've been doing that for years, and we can do that because just from knowing people and the contacts and get invited, well, you can drop in easily in a small airplane, and it's fast. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, all right, and I've been doing that for years. I had a pilot's license before I had a driver's license, and my wife would go around with me and everything. Off we went. We had a good time. Um, for a variety of reasons, that turned so weird. Example, libraries. Who would have dreamed that libraries have become very dangerous places in America?
Boy,
Can you
that is
imagine?
interesting. Yeah, elaborate on that a little bit because I think some people are seeing that from a perspective and taking, especially in the rural libraries, where they're bringing in, you know, ideas and thought processes. But I'm interested in hearing your experience there.
Oh, it's even well, you know, this is obviously everything ratcheted down with the lockdowns.
Right.
But what effectively happened, a lot of businesses closed, a lot of homelessness, a lot of unemployed people, probably a third to 40% of the small businesses got extinguished. Uh, you wind up with all these homeless people, okay?
Ah,
And they tend to congregate near libraries because if it's cold or if it's warm, they can go in. Anybody can go into a library and they can be dry or warm or cold or whatever they need. So they clustered, and pretty soon you had homeless camps near the libraries, and then you have a lot of drugs. The drug dealers come in, and then the cartels come in, and then they start robbing each other, and it gets violent. And and of course, the city, well, they got to let everybody in. Okay. So in some of the places where I used to go, nice little towns, in one case, they burned the library down, killed two people.
wow.
Okay.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
and here we thought it was just, some of the uh, different stuff on these weirdly dressed people that are confused about their gender coming in and doing mental damage. You're talking about real physical damage at a library.
Well, okay. Yeah. The group you're talking about, we're
That's
Portland,
different.
Oregon,
Yeah.
beautiful little town. Yeah, now the world headquarters for Antifa. I know it's just an idea, but do you realize the damage just from the fires and the riots in the last year or so was like 1.2, $1.3 billion,
It's
all of which is going to be repaid out of the COVID bill.
Yeah.
So huge amounts of damage, riots, everything. So much bigger there. But the
Right.
libraries were not as organized. They weren't targeted by design. The one I was talking about that got burned down was Porterville, California,
Oh my.
and and a beautiful little town. We had friends there. It was about halfway between Arizona and Oregon, so we'd stop at the airport and yada yada. Um, and anyway, but the library was an older wooden building, 2 stories. And it was right by the city hall. It's a small town, right next to the fire station. And kind of feral kids would hang out there in the daytime and cause trouble. And 2 of them burned the library down.
Oh my.
And in the course of doing that, it was right next to the fire station. The firefighters came over and they thought a woman in a wheelchair was trapped on the 2nd floor and they were trying to get to her. Well, she had gotten out, but the building collapsed and 2 firefighters, one of them was a pretty highly respected captain, was killed. That's one. Mostly the libraries just eventually give up and they close them. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
And so you have all these weird stories. The library is closed. A lady that does some stuff for my books, she and her husband's beautiful town. I won't name it, in Washington. And they rented some gizmos from the library where they could stream audiobooks and ebooks and everything else. And you rent the things by the month. And it's so much a month, 50, $100, I don't know. And they go to return them. Well, they can't. The library's closed now.
Oh no. Oh my goodness.
So there they are. And so anyway, that was kind of the life. But these little towns and just grassroots America, really great. All right. Well, the airplane thing, my wife had owned that particular plane. We bought it as a wedding present for ourselves. And we'll go all over. It's well maintained, Piper Twin Comanche. And the short version is we finally were catching up with things, moved, transitioned back from Arizona to Oregon. June 1st is our anniversary. And we went out to a wilderness area and people meet us there and they take us into neat kind of camps where you can stay. Actually, pretty nice places. We do that, visit Planet Friends on the way back. And we're coming back to back home, back to our town in Oregon.
Right.
As we take off from this little airport, also we had tankered up on fuel, so we had a lot of fuel on board because there was a fuel service problem where we were going. All right, fine. Off we go. There's this clunk as the landing gear comes up. It's a clunk.
Yeah.
And it's kind of at the time it was kind of spongy weather, not bad, not real good, but it had an instrument clearance in. And they're handling you and do this, do that, change this frequency, go this way, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And what's that clunk? Okay. And my wife heard it too. She wanted to know. And I looked, well, all the gauges are normal and everything. Okay. And the plane's running good. And I'm pretty well loaded up with traffic control. I finally get going. No, everything's fine. Cruising speed's fine. Everything's normal. Everything's in the green. And we get where we're going. And by the weather got better. The weather was pretty decent, really. And we're coming in. It's at dusk, maybe a little after dusk. I don't know. And there's other planes. So I slow down way out, go to put the gear down, and okay. And then I look, no green light.
Oh. Yeah.
And I trust nothing. I'm training as an engineer, and I hung out with military people that get you really paranoid about stuff. And okay, and so everything else, I have a little mirror on the engine nacelle so I can see the wheels, and the nose gear doors are open, but no wheel.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we're hung up there, and I call on the Unicom, and I say, okay, we got a problem here, and I'll fly around. And I flew around for a good hour and a half trying the emergency systems and everything, and even called my mechanic on my cell phone who was at the airport. And he says, what have you done for the emergency procedures? And I go through the stuff, and there's this long silence.
Oh.
And I wait, and I said, Graham? Still silent. Graham, what can I do? He says, nothing.
Oh my. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I go, Okay. Well, what do you think we're going to do? He says, well, let me get some fire trucks out here.
Yeah.
Okay. So he does that.
So in the next 5 minutes, you got fire trucks coming on. You flew, I remember you telling me when we talked about this, you're flying that pattern, you're trying to figure this thing out. And so in the next couple of minutes, what happened?
Well, what happened was it took longer than that for the fire trucks, but that was fine. And I get all lined up and I'm going to land. And the fire guy comes on the intercom frequency and he says, we've been talking. We don't want you to land here.
Oh, no. Yeah.
and,
Right.
and I'm like, whoa, okay. Well, let me go back to altitude and we can talk about this. Because
Right.
I'm pilot in command.
Yeah.
In theory, okay. So I do that, and he says, well, we've been talking with the airport people, and they want you to go over to Salem, the capital, because they got bigger fire trucks over there, and they don't want you to blow, he didn't say it, they don't want you to blow up on their airport.
Right.
Okay. And so, all right, yeah, fine, we'll do that. We get over there, and they were expecting us, and it was after hours. There was no traffic or anything. And they had humongous fire trucks. I mean, you had to go up 2 ladders to get into these things. And they're waiting for us. I'd already had several people on the ground look at the plane. The wheels, they said they were down about 20%. The guy at the tower at Salem says, well, come on by and roll the airplane. They're down about 40%. Didn't make any difference. You couldn't move them.
Right.
And so, all right, so now all this equipment's in position, and what are you going to do? I'll look it over, and next pass I'll come around if it looks good, I'll land. And so I'm doing all this, and we're ready for you. And here's the part: my wife was wonderful. She's put up with all this for years, and she has 2 things to do, and we briefed on them. Number one, you have to have the door open. When I come in and that's just rule number 1. Door has to be open. We do not want to be stuck in an airplane where we can't get out. There's only one main door. Right. She's got that. She understands. I said, okay. The second thing here in this situation, I have no idea what's going to happen when this thing touches the ground. And so whatever happens when it stops sliding, I want you out of there and as far away as you can get. So you got 2 things to do, right? Yeah, she's got that. Yeah. Okay, so we come in, and the last 10, 20 seconds gets really busy. So I'm doing all this pilot stuff.
Right.
And it turns out okay. And we wound up sliding down the runway. It was very gentle, very loud. Okay, but we weren't even thrown against the belts.
Yeah.
So finally the plane stops, and we're looking at, we're surrounded by fire trucks. And I look over there. Sure enough, she has the door open. I knew that, but she's still sitting there.
Of course.
And I look, and by the way, the emergency hatch is open. That's how you get to the gear system for the. So I'm looking down. Normally, you would see the bottom of the airplane. Well, no, that's gone. I just see the runway.
Yeah.
And there's little tendrils of black smoke coming up. And I look at her, and she's got the cord for the headset wrapped around her ankles.
Oh no! Oh, gravy.
And so I'm thinking this woman needs help. So what I do is I reach over and I grab the headset and yank it loose, throw it in the back seat, and I need to give her some gentle motivation. So I say, "Move your ass, woman."
Yeah.
Okay.
We're down to the last minute, John. So you got 30 seconds.
Okay,
please.
go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, she gets out, and the rest of it is fine. And it all ended by the feds interviewed me from a pickup truck on the runway that night and decided to do a full investigation, which is still ongoing for probably going for another year. It was a major failure of a problematic Piper part. So that's that story.
Yeah.
And I've retired from flying now. It was time anyway.
Yeah. Well, that the good thing is that once you get up, it's always good to be able to get back down. And even with in aviation and general aviation, when there's calamities that come around, I always say it's a cool head, much experience, and training that allows people to survive. And with that, that's what our founders understood. And Sam Adams was always encouraging people to train as if they needed to do that or needed to engage in some calamity at one time or another. So come on back for the second segment, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti Federalists, they did. They got it right. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and we are here at Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty does work for you. And I want to encourage everyone to check out all of the other hosts and hostesses, the live programming all week long, as well as find that button, that special button that I always suggest that you find is donate. This is a listener-funded network. It's all about you, and it's all about your liberty, which requires us not only to just listen, but it requires us to act. And with that, I have my friend John Trudel, a great author, a experienced pilot, as we heard from our first segment, and that adventure that he was on. But really with all of that, John, as you're coming back in here in a moment, is that all of that was in the promotion of your books, but things are really happening. I mean, we saw with the last time we spoke on your most recent book that there were going to be some interesting things that could occur out in the rest of the world. But we've seen stuff that, is like now it goes back to what you and I've talked about a number of different times on holy smokes, the evil just is awoke and active. And where's the hero, John? Where's the hero from your books? and that great,
Yeah,
you know?
all this stuff that we have been predicting and setting novels against uh, has been turning real. But the thing that has happened now, the way I express it, we're past the Tom Clancy limits.
Right.
Tom Clancy was asked, what's the difference between novels and reality? And Clancy's answer was novels have to make sense. Okay. Well, what has happened, particularly in the last year, is we're way off the chart. Reality no longer makes any sense at all. Okay.
Right. No,
So you
true.
put it into a novel, and just by happenstance, the stuff you and I have talked about in previous interviews, Venezuela and the invasion corridor and yada, yada, yada.
Hmm.
And that was the setting of the book.
Right.
Now, I never took it far enough, you know. Oh, okay. Well, we know what happened to Venezuela. They had the Dominion systems and a coup, and they took them over, and they woke up the next morning and they were communists. Or it took a few years, but eventually they'd been what the best healthcare in the Western Hemisphere, second most prosperous, and bingo, in the middle of the election, they wake up and the election's been stolen, and pretty soon they're a communist country, and they lose all their rights, and
Right.
pretty soon bad scene. Okay, so that was the world of where Broken Oath was set,
Hmm.
but I didn't take it into saying, well, they're going to steal an American election,
Right. Yeah.
okay, because my characters are busy enough trying to stay alive anyway.
Yes.
So, wow, okay, but they did, and it was Dominion. And of course, now if the people who bring that up get sued for $1.3 billion, you can't substantiate that, No, it's just, okay. So that has changed the world, I think, for novels, probably, which is crazy, okay?
Yeah.
But nothing that has happened in the last year, very little, as far as threats.
Hmm.
Thrillers are about threats,
Yes.
where bad people are trying to do something, you're trying to stop them. Well, nothing makes it. The pandemic that was kind of prearranged, followed by a lockdown, followed by going to vote by mail, which both parties had said wasn't trustworthy,
Hmm.
followed by the stolen election, which was exactly what happened in Venezuela,
Yep.
even with some of the same techniques. And now we've moved on to other things. We have what was it? Chuck Schumer called it the erection insurrection.
Yeah.
He kind of stumbled on a TV broadcast.
Right.
It was like the Reichstag fire. After all this is happening, they have a normal rally in the street, and and it's a setup, And okay, so here we have all these people who allegedly did violent things. Some of them went to places they shouldn't have been, but
Right.
that is the whole narrative now, and they'll probably investigate that for the next 3 or 4 years. The reality was only one person was killed by violence. That poor veteran gal that
Yes.
got shot.
Right.
Unarmed, she's there, boom, she's dead. And
Yeah.
then a bunch of other people have kind of medical incidents. I think three of them. They were all Trump supporters, by the way. So
Yes.
that's the insurrection.
Right.
And now we've moved on to where anti-white racism is okay, and they want to have political officers in the military like Stalin did.
Yes. I know. You imagine
my God.
I know it's
imagine?
livid. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because, as we look, and just like you said, beyond Clancy, beyond so many of the other novelists like yourself, and as you and I've spoken in the past, Venezuela was like staring us right in the face. And boy, how predictive we could have been. We've warned people for years. I know I have, I know you have, and in our different mechanisms, but to see now the crisis at hand, I think, boy, how are you going to put that into some writing?
Well, there's a lot going on, and I've met, including you, I've met some amazing people. I developed some good friendships. And I can't talk about what I'm going to do next, and we'll see what happens. But I got some people and a big publisher that want to do a nonfiction book. And
good.
Yeah,
well, we'll leave it at that. We'll keep everybody
we'll
guessing.
leave it at that. Yeah.
Let's keep people guessing, because I know you have some good contacts. Some of the people that we've both either referenced or had other introductions to, and that. So it'll be fun to see what that future brings, especially in the context of not only our present observations, but trying to ascertain how we take and look at the construct of reversing how quickly, which we saw in Venezuela, which we saw in a lot of the third world countries, once the socialist communists come into power, they act so fast that to take and start reversing some of that. I mean, you're watching what's going on there in Arizona because that's where you're at right now, and I'm sure those observations are intriguing. I guess is one way that you could put it.
It's actually pretty fascinating because some of the people involved, they're still trying to audit the votes down here. Maricopa County was the key county. It's the largest one. And that's where I'm sitting right now talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they are still fighting their way through that. And if they ever get an honest count, it will probably change how Arizona voted, and then maybe the rest of the dominoes. But I actually know some of the people involved in that,
mm-hmm.
and they're fighting it out every yard of the way.
Yes.
I think there's three paths that we'll see, and people keep talking about this.
Okay, let's take what we got is about 3 minutes. No, we got 3 minutes. Oh, 6 minutes. Kath just corrected me. So I'm going to watch that with you because with three paths, I'm intrigued to take those and then move them into the third segment as well. So please, sorry for the interruption.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, the three obvious paths, and what people say who study history, is that this has happened before. We had Rome and everybody else, and eventually the Republic fails, and it's just total chaos. And in the case of Rome, we know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
The situation now, eventually there has to be somebody restore order. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Right now, Biden is mentally sick and confused. Harris is despised and very, very dangerous.
Yes.
And nature abhors a vacuum. So all that weakness demands a strong-fisted solution. And the famous saying, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. So we'll
Yeah.
talk about where these things may go. But I think that's the current status quo. That plus the fact with social media kind of in charge of censoring and seeing what we can, are allowed to view. I don't know how. Well, we'll talk about. I'll talk about something called the reality prism. We can get into that too, and
Okay.
then we can see about three roads. Okay.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And as I'm looking at that and what you were just mentioning about on Biden himself and his condition, it was before we got on the call. I was just looking on some follow up from his press conference that he gave today, and what was just the clips. I didn't watch the press conference. I couldn't tolerate to watch it myself, but just looking at the various clips and commentaries. I mean, the guy walks away from the microphone, turns around as if he's talking into a microphone, and starts the thing all over again. It's like, how he has no sense of where he is in time and space. It's just amazing. And
Yeah, he's pretty deeply confused and into dementia. Well, it's pretty. I'm not a doctor, but he can't get through two sentences.
yeah, I know. One of my degrees is in behavioral science, and so when I look at that, I sit there and go, yeah, this guy's definitely got some problems. So and who's pulling? Kathy always says, his puppet masters are the what's happening out there. And Kamala, I think you nailed it on the head. She is so despised, and that's that whole perspective of the division within the Democrats themselves and the power plays that are going on in relationship to the hardcore socialist and not even the moderates anymore. I mean, it's that's an interesting segment, interesting thought.
Yeah, who's running the government? I don't think we know.
I would agree. Yeah,
You know. Yeah.
yeah, they're all over the map. They just but what we saw in who they've placed into the various departments are people that are, the fallbacks from the Obama administration and some of the new players that weren't there before. But boy, they're all part of worse than the deep state. They're ones that are taking us down that path that I think is going to be real interesting as we, jump back in on things here in a few minutes in that third segment. But why don't you just give me what do we got, Kath? About 2 minutes? Yeah, why don't you give me a minute more on your thoughts of the,
Okay. Well,
yeah,
yeah. Right now we can talk about the different factions, but I don't think right now anybody, including them, the left knows who's in charge. Obviously, people behind the scenes are pulling the strings. It's nobody that you're seeing on screen.
right,
And there's probably three paths you can go down. One is I think the worst case is Venezuela. You become a communist state, and all freedom is lost.
right.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the kind of trajectory that they would that they're kind of advocating. And in this case, you got China
Oh
as
boy.
a very strong player on top of it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's one path. The other thing is somehow we get a miraculous recovery, and then God has saved America a couple of times,
Right.
but in this case, it's going to take people. I think that we're sitting around praying isn't going to get this done,
Right.
and I think it's interesting. We all forget now, but Alinsky, who did the modern communism, he dedicated his book to Lucifer.
Right.
So they're absolutely demonic in dividing people. So we
Yes.
got Venezuela, we got some sort of recovery back to our republic, which is rare in history, or we have just total violence and chaos. Okay, or we'll have pockets of resistance. Well, we talk about those three paths.
Yeah.
But
So
that's what I see as possibilities.
sure. Yeah, and I think, I tell people all the time that, to your point, is that's where the founders had an advantage. First off, they had real unanimity with the people. They had the pulpits that were pretty much in that same account with them. And then third, because of a lot of the lesser magistrates that were being elected, they were right there as well. Sam Adams being one of that, the anti-federalist understanding. Come on back for the third segment. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti Federalists got it right. This is Tom Navolis, and welcome back, all you folks down there in Lima, Ohio. Oh, yeah, with my Screaming Eagles. I know it's the Soaring Eagle Radio, and sure do appreciate all of you folks joining us back in. I really recommend you take and listen to the whole podcast at samueladamsreturns.net or go to YouTube and see the Samuel Adams Returns channel. But if you don't get that second segment and cue in there, you're missing a lot of the goodies that John and I were talking about. Oh, yeah, that's right. My guest, John Trudel, which I introduced him in the first segment to all you folks down there in Lima. You missed the second, but now we have the third. And John, talking about thirds, you were introducing in the last segment this idea of three things that you were notating and wanting to bring forward. Why don't you just kind of jump right in with that?
Well, all right. Right now, obviously, we're in deep distress, and you're spot on. I mean, Sam Adams knew, our founding fathers knew, and they had what let them defeat the most powerful nation in the world is just people, a few people, a small percentage. They could mingle, they could talk in taverns and everything. They could get organized, and that's America. It's always been a few exceptional people who made a huge difference. Now, that's the most dangerous thing about the lockdown. We can't
Yes.
assemble. We can't go to church. We can't even go to events. I mean, if you have Thanksgiving, Biden says, well, maybe if you're really nice, you can have hamburgers with a small group in your backyard on the 4th of July. And then you go, okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So the fact that we can't talk to each other openly and the censorship is more than just shutting people down. I mean, they're
Right.
on social media, the other platforms. Gab is up now and running, but they're still small. Parler totally got shut down, and it wasn't just Amazon that threw them off their servers with 24 hours of notice. They got cut off by all the banks and everything,
Right.
so they can't take credit cards. So huge amounts of effort going into silencing our ability to talk to each other. Okay. So strategy proceeds. We wind up with Venezuela, the Venezuela scenario, which is a totally communist state run by unaccountable elites. And in this case, as you'll see in my novel, Broken Oath,
Yes.
the force there is really contracted thugs from Cuba.
Right.
Okay, so Cuba
Yes.
makes a little money off it. And so that's a horrible scenario, and I don't know how you recover from that, but that's one possibility.
Yes.
The other possibility is somehow enough people will get together to get us on a path to recovery. And there are such people, okay? There are such people out there. I'm a big fan of General Flynn. I'm a big fan of Paul Valley, who's a personal friend.
Yes.
And these guys are on top of it.
Right.
And also, I always, my mind locks up, the lawyer lady.
Yes. Sidney Powell.
Sidney Powell.
Right.
Sidney Powell. Those kind of folks know what to do. And they actually were advocating that. It was, I think, too controversial. But you could do that with enough support from the public. And I think people are getting pretty fed up. So that would be probably the best thing. And then the next thing is just be violence. It'd be somewhere in between those states. We'd be on the road to violence,
right.
The road to Venezuela, but there'd be pockets of resistance. Okay. Yes. And it's so twisted now. The like I say, so little is real.
Yes.
Um, what really happened? Okay, there's there wasn't any invasion of the capital. It was a multi-step setup,
Right.
okay, and where they changed their rules. If they had just left their rules in place, they were all going to be socially distanced and people could come in. It was the people's capital. You can
Yes.
only have so many because of COVID. Well, they changed all that. They said, no, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to lock it down. And then, oh, okay, do you want some troops? No, we don't want some troops. And so they didn't have any troops. And then guess what? They were inviting Antifa in
Yes.
before it all happened.
Right.
Okay, you know that.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, so now they have the Reichstag fire, and they say, well, all this was bad people, and the Republicans did it. It was all
Yeah.
Trump's fault. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
So there, if we're stuck where we are, there's probably going to be violence. So if we go down the Venezuela route, it's probably hopeless. So I'm hoping for the middle path. I'm hoping that there'll be some sanity. Some of these people will resist. And right now, sitting in Arizona, we just all the Western states lost their right to walk around with guns, carry permits, and everything else. There's a ruling from the one of the panels at the Ninth Circuit, which will probably be overturned. But you wait, oh, you
Yeah.
can't have a gun to defend yourself, you know.
Wow.
And wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
hard to
interesting.
say,
Yeah.
but the stuff. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, in following that, and especially in the melding of the first and second scenario in particular, one of the many projects that I've been working on are, not only here in the state of Ohio, but across the country with some of the same people that you may know in Arizona as well as in other states, is that to take and turn the tide of what happened, it would be to reinstantiate the states with a clear understanding of the Ninth and Tenth Amendment, as well as having people truly understand their state constitutions and that the power lies in the people, and that in understanding that, we then have that capacity to work within the state legislatures, which we saw in Arizona in particular, to the point that the legislature as saying that Maricopa needs to be recounted. So I think that if we can take and continue to push things forward, or as in Pennsylvania, which I know one of the key players in Pennsylvania that ran all the data and found the subversion within their whole voters database, and that now the state of Pennsylvania has virtually thrown out everything in their existing database and said, we got to redo all of this. So if we can get that type of action, I guess to your point, moving forward, and then with the likes of both generals and Sidney Powell and others of that caliber, I think we can, number one, establish that front of good leadership at the national level, but also facilitate, what we need to do at each and every state level as well.
Right, and some of the states like Montana have already anticipated this, and they're saying, "No, you can't take our guns away. We're a sovereign state here,
Right.
and we aren't going to allow that. We aren't going to recognize federal law." So we're off in a space where um, America hasn't been before. But on top of it, what we suffered, what caused all this, was really a confluence of things. One was, of course, basically a bioweapons attack. Okay,
Mhm.
so you have a new virus, Kachunk, and it's very infectious, and we can't call it the China virus, even though it was developed in that lab, and by the way, funded by Fauci with federal money.
Right.
Not just the lab partially, but that specific virus.
Yeah.
So there's a paper trail on that. But they say baseless claims. Well, yeah, you can have piles of evidence, and it means nothing. You have to hear the evidence, and you have to process it through a legal system, or else it's a baseless claim. It's just a pile of evidence,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Hey, you and I
So if
both
we can
know
get
you and I both know National Science Foundation, and they have a stinky paper trail, but they have a paper trail.
Yeah, they do have a stinky paper trail. All this stuff can be tracked. And right now, God, poor Arizona down here, they've been fighting for what, 4 months now just to count their ballots. For a while, they were all locked in a big room, but nobody was allowed to look at
Right. Yeah.
them. You know,
Yeah.
and you have, yeah, and the death stats and everything else. Um, and the old cures for the virus, they were basically off limits. And doctors who said, well, wait a minute, we got some good stuff that would work on this, they got deplatformed. They said, no, the hospitals would rather go with the federal money and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So we got to get back to where we can sense reality, to where we know where it is.
Yeah.
And right now, it is so far away from what we're being told. We're everything is, okay, we have a shooting. Well, okay, so some Muslim guy goes into a supermarket or a store and bang, 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 shoots, 8 people. And it happened to be a store that sold Jewish stuff, too.
Right.
Okay, isn't that a coincidence? But he was a white nationalist, and so it turned out, no, he was. Yeah. He was from Syria. Poof, it all disappears from the news, and they're on to the next scary thing.
Right. Yeah. 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 We got 4 minutes left, but one of the things that would have been more fun, and probably give 2 minutes on this, if you will, is that everything that you were saying, especially around what I call the Chi-Com flu, and I'm not afraid to say that, is that what we saw not only was the money coming in from the Fauci regime specifically to that, but what's even more scary is what we have is private businesses, large corporations that are actually now implementing policy for the government. And I think that's even more scary than anything else, that you have private companies or publicly owned companies that are saying you can't fly unless you do this. You can't come in our store unless you do this. You can't. What? Wow, John, that's a whole novel as well. Or
Yeah, there's something that our founding fathers could not have anticipated, that there would be a hierarchy of structure. Some of it is private enterprise. Very hard to tell if China's involved what's private enterprise and what's a state kind of thing.
True.
They overlap real heavily.
Yep.
But where's the accountability? And you have these huge companies that basically have immunity. They can censor people, and they can promote other things, and they're unaccountable to anybody. So
Right.
that has to stop. And I think even the Democrats are a little bit afraid of that. They have an enormous amount of power and can do basically anything they want, including shutting you down, censoring you, or even saying, no, you can't get on an airplane, or you can't even, these poor, and sometimes the companies are victims. You have a little bitty business, you're running a restaurant or something like that, and no, you can't have people in, and so you get to go out of business, or a barbershop.
Right.
I think that is the most damaging decision that has ever been made in the U.S. We killed 30% of our economy.
Yes.
That will probably never come back.
Yes.
And these people were not Democratic voters for the most part. They were entrepreneurs. They were very, good Americans who believed in freedom and innovation and opportunity, and they got squashed, and that's horrible.
Yes. No, that's, you're exactly right. And I think that's the travesty of the whole thing. But when you take and you have nefarious actors, as we've talked about already today and in previous times, that their intent is to take and manipulate every aspect of what we have. And, quite frankly, that's what the Anti-Federalists did predict, that under the guise of a constitution that we have. That's why they wanted that Bill of Rights. Real quick, give me 30 seconds because we got 57 seconds left.
Okay, well, basically, that's the world. My novels, Broken Oath, very well accepted. Nothing but 5 stars on Amazon, even though Amazon hates me. And the book that's coming back, Surprisingly, it hit the top 100 on Amazon. Think about that. They have millions of books. And so, Soft Target, happily about bioweapons, is one of my older novels. Without any promotion, all of a sudden it was in the top 100. People all over the world were calling me and saying, "John, did you know?" No, I
Right.
didn't know.
Yeah. No, that
Okay.
makes sense,
So,
John.
so
That's perfect. I mean, when we talk about bioweapon, we just talk about COVID, and I got to wrap it up right here, right now. John, it was a delight to have you on again. And ladies and gentlemen, come on back next week when Sam Adams returns and those anti-federalists got it right.